Hey there guys, Music Fan here. How you guys doing? I'm going to go on a quick track-by-track review of the Unforgettable Fire, U2's fourth album, and have it right here. Actually, what I have is the 25th anniversary edition of the album, which is pretty cool. It's pretty awesome. Anyway, let's get straight into the track-by-track. First track, Sort of Homecoming. Really one of their most underrated classics in their catalog, at least in my opinion. When I hear this song, I think of being in the on the beach and being splashed, like just kind of light splashes of the ocean against my face, and it just feels so refreshing. That's what reminds me of this particular track. This track is like a surging opening number, really kind of is a little more atmospheric in its musical approach than the songs off of War, and really kind of announces this to be a little bit of a different U2 album than prior U2 albums, and this really starts off the album in probably the most beautiful and atmospheric note on an album. And really, what I enjoy about this track is Larry Mullen's fluid drumming, Adam's also fluid bass playing, Edge's guitar, which really creates a really fantastic gliding dynamic to it. Really gives a bit more of an atmospheric energy and a bit of a push, just kind of adding an extra color to this track. And Bono's vocals here are top notch. I especially enjoy the part where he sings like "She will die and live again tonight." Really, that high note vocal harmony that he does, which I really simply adore. I adore that vocal harmony. Pride in the Name of Love, like this is one of U2's biggest hits in 1984 up until this point, and really along with this and other more rock orientated tracks on this album is really the only track to really harken back to U2's War era. Really, this track is a surging, catchy anthem attributed to the late Reverend Martin Luther King and his immense contribution to the civil rights movement of the 1960s. It's a really amazing track, and they have that great anthem, "In the Name of Love, what more in the name of love," and sorry, and really just a great, fantastic song. I really don't care if this track gets played to the moon and back. It's considered very overrated now, but I still love it. Love this track immensely. Another track I love immensely is Wire. Really, this is one of U2's very most energetic songs in their catalog, and especially on this album. Really, this song is really packed with like very fast-paced, very forensic energy all throughout this track, and really some of Bono's most menacing and most stirring vocal performances on a U2 album really is hosted in this track here. Edge's guitar playing, especially when it gets to the middle point, when he does that really crazy thing with his whammy bar and just punctuating and like an ear-splitting guitar noise in this track. And it's really, when I first heard that, I kept thinking, this is the most awesomest guitar part I have ever heard in my life. And really, this is one of Edge's highlights, guitar highlights on this track. Of course, Adam Clayton and Larry Mullen are in full flight on this particular track here, and that's Wire. The Unforgettable Fire, the title track, simply gorgeous. Has this is really the center representation of what the rest of this album is like. It's very atmospheric. It's very laden in lyrical, beautiful, abstract but also beautiful lyrical imagery throughout this track, and really has a very lush, very sweeping orchestras playing in the middle portion of this song, which really only heightens the atmospheric feel of this particular track. I sincerely I adore this track, really I do. And Unforgettable Fire is a beautiful song. One of their most criminally underrated tracks, mind you, in U2's catalog, at least in my opinion. Promenade. This is a beautiful track. I really adore the light guitar touches to this particular song that Edge does, and really the rest of the band plays very softly, but they play very organic and very fluid throughout this track. And Bono's vocal harmonies here are, again, top notch. They're so pure in its intent and very pure in its sound, really. And I love the lyrical imagery to this track. I really beautiful, beautiful set of lyrics. And 4th of July. Sorry, 4th of July is another great track here. Even though it's short, I think it came from a band improvisation between the Edge playing like an e-bow device on his guitar and Adam strumming a bass part, and producer Brian Eno overhearing the jam session and then later recorded it without them knowing. And he later adds some synth of his synths into this track, which really creates a very short but very beautiful track, which is very short in its length, but still has this spacey feel to it. It has a very atmospheric vibe to this track. But it really is a perfect introduction to the next track, which is Bad. Definitely one of U2's prime classics, and it's really the first song on their catalog that really has a dynamic structure to it. It really reminds me of the aesthetic of jazz music, that it starts from a simple musical part and then it just simply builds and builds and builds until it reaches a big peaking crescendo and then dropping off in the middle there. Lyrically, it's attributed to Bono's friend who was traumatized by one of the terrorist bombings in Dublin, Ireland, and he was becoming addicted to heroin, which was very available around that time in the 80s in Ireland, in Dublin. And really this track is attributed to Bono's friend, who he makes very abstract but still poignant and very beautiful lyrical writing on this track. This is amongst his best lyrical works ever, and the rest of the band contributes to this rising crescendo as it starts from a simple Edge guitar part, and it slowly adds and builds, and like Larry Mullen's drumming only intensifying as the track enters this crescendo, and it's just one of their most beautiful pieces of work ever in their catalog. Indian Summer Sky really still has a bit of a rock feel to it, but yet still laden with an atmospheric vibe. I don't know why, but every time I hear this song, I get like a Native American vibe from this track. I really do, and it's very dynamic in its energy, and it's just a surging number, if a bit one of their most underrated, in my opinion. The only downside to this track is Brian Eno's backing harmonies, and while that contributes to this song a lot, sometimes it can get to the point of being a little bit distracting, but it's not to the point where I completely dismiss this song entirely. Elvis Presley and America, this track is really one of their most experimental, if not their most experimental track of this album, and it really is a slowed down backing track of the track A Sort of Homecoming, and this is a much looser and more flowing kind of sound with this particular song. It's like Edge really makes really beautiful and yet punctuating guitar notes using his whammy bar, along with making very punctuated guitar notes here, and Bono just singing so fluidly from his vocal performance is so pure and just so relieving in his harmonies, in his vocal harmonies on this particular track. And even though many people may not warm up to this track, I definitely still love it. And the closing track on this album, MLK, beautiful, simply gorgeously beautiful. One of the best closers to an album, if not a U2 album in their catalog. Lyrically, it's a simple and yet effective tribute to Martin Luther King, and it's so beautiful, and it's almost like a lullaby in many ways, but it fits perfectly within the span of this album, and it really I could not think of a better closer to this album than MLK. Simply beautiful. So this album, yeah, I love it. I definitely really love it. Tell me what you think. What's your favorite track on this album? What's your least favorite track? I don't think I have a favorite track for me personally. I'll put it in the description below. Tell me what you think of this album. What's your favorite tracks? And I'll see you next time. This is a track by track review. You too, Unforgettable Fire. Take care, guys.